What's up everyone, I hope you're doing great and following the 3 H's of the channel. In this video, I have 2 encounters for you, which may not sound like a whole lot, but when you see how absolutely strange these encounters are, the number of them won't matter. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I hope that you'll pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. Okay. First, a little backstory. I'm a reptile enthusiast, and until recently, 2020, I bred, sold, and collected large pythons. In 2015, I joined a reptile expedition through the Amazon jungle that was led by some of the world's top herpetologists. It was a dream come true for me, and long story short, I went and had a blast. Some of the people I met there are still my closest friends to this day. I missed the expedition the following year, and I promised myself that I wouldn't miss the next one. So, 2017 comes around, and I see the advertisement for the trip on Facebook, and boom, my credit card comes out, and I book a flight. The trek would start and end in a city in Peru called Iquitos, which you could only reach by boat or by plane. There were 3 lodges that we would be staying at on our way, with 1 night planned first at the lodge, 2 nights at another lodge, and then 2 nights at a 3rd lodge. So the day I arrive, I get acquainted with everybody, and I check into my quote room. It was only meant to function as a place to sleep, since the point of the trip was to spend the whole day enjoying the wilderness of the Amazon. The layout of the rooms and the lodge is extremely important to this story, so let me explain it briefly. The rooms were all the same, I think 8 feet by 8 feet, and they were arranged in a row. There were 13 total, just a long lodge of single rooms. No ceilings, just a big canopy that covered all the rooms. The back wall, near the head of the bed, was actually only a half wall with a curtain that covered it the rest of the way up. There were also these stairs that came up from the jungle right up to the center of the lodge. Anyway, we mostly did our own exploring during the day, and since it was our first day, a bunch of people stayed out really late exploring. They didn't get back until 5 a.m., but by the end of the second night, even those of us that hadn't been out so late the previous day were pretty tired. I think we called it quits around 2 a.m. Now here is where things start to get weird. I don't know if this is the first thing that has anything to do with what happened next, but as I was settling into my bed, there was a persistent knock on the door to my room, and the person outside was calling me by my nickname. The thing is, nobody there knew me by that name, not even the guy leading the trip, who was a friend of mine. Since it was late, and I really didn't want to get out of bed, I pretended to be asleep, ignoring the knocking until it went away. As I'm lying there, I realize that the curtain behind me on the half wall is kind of open. I get up to close it, but I take a moment to open it a bit to look out at the jungle outside. As I'm looking, I suddenly get this feeling. I don't know if it was intuition or what it was, but it was like something telling me, shut up, close the curtain, get in bed. I don't know where the feeling came from, but I did just that, and within 5 minutes, I hear a mechanical beeping nearby. 3 beeps with an echo, sort of like a beep, 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 beep. Right after that, I began to hear grunting. At first, I thought that there was a really big animal, but as I listened, I realized that I could make out at least 3 grunting to each other, and then one of them let out a reptilian-sounding hiss. The jungle went completely silent, except for the sounds of these creatures. As I'm thinking that there is no way that anybody would be able to sleep through this, and I didn't really have a good reference of time, but after maybe 30 minutes of listening to these things walk around outside, I hear a strange sound, kind of like an R2-D2 type sound, like a computer, but I hear that sound, and it zooms right over my room, and I see that it's coming from some type of orb. It zooms all the way to the first room at the edge of the lodge. I was in the 12th room at the opposite end. So this thing goes over room 1, and I see that it shined a light straight down into the room, like it was signaling that room. At that point, the whole lodge began to shake, and I heard something hurrying up the stairs, the ones that led up from the jungle to the lodge. Whatever it is, it sounds like it jumps over the wall into room 1. Now, I'm really freaked out. I start thinking in my head, how is all this going to turn out? I'm imagining the Channel 4 news report of a group of expeditioners going missing in the Amazon. I don't really know how much time passed, maybe 10 more minutes. Then the sound and the orb moved over to room 2, and I hear the same thing as before. Something jumps into room 2. At this point, I'm starting to think about my mom and what she's going to think if I die in the Amazon. I get out a notepad, and as quietly as I can, I write a letter to her, saying that there's something outside the rooms, but I'm going to stay inside, and that if I end up going missing, it's because something has came and took me. This sequence of events with the rooms happens maybe 4 or 5 times. When it gets to room 6, this thing jumps in the room, and I don't know what caused it, but this thing gave a loud shriek. I can only imagine what's going on and what this thing looks like. I'm sitting in my room in complete darkness, complete silence, with no defense, scared out of my mind. It's eventually going to get to my room. The orb gets into the room right next to mine and shines its light. I hear the thing jump the wall into the room, and after a minute, I hear my neighbor in her sleep let out a quick, sound. Then, almost as if she were made to feel uncomfortable or something, she sighs, "Ugh," and that's all I heard. I know that I'm next, and I feel completely helpless against whatever this thing is. The same way that earlier I felt like that shut up and get in bed feeling. I could feel now that it would be a very bad idea to scream and make my non-cooperation known, so I stayed silent. The orb went over my room, but didn't signal. It must have seen that I was not asleep and moved past me to the last room. Then, suddenly the guy that prepares our breakfast and stuff for the lodge turns on the generators so he can make breakfast. Right when he does this, I hear the same beeps as I did at the beginning of the experience, and all the beings are gone. Then, everyone starts to wake up at the exact same time. Now, I'm wondering, when I go outside, are some of the people in the group going to be missing, dead, zombified, worse, I don't know. So I step outside and I go into the breakfast room, and everybody's there. They're just acting normal. Nobody else even realized that anything had happened. I asked them, and every single person said that they slept the whole night through. In fact, out of everyone there, not one person got up to get a drink of water. Not one person got up to go to the bathroom. Not one person snored. The next night, I heard people doing all those things. The only thing I can think of is that they all had some sort of trance put on them to keep them asleep, and somehow, either I wasn't affected, or they just didn't do it to me. Only one woman said that she woke up in the middle of the night and felt very dazed and disoriented. She told me that she looked at her clock and it was 3 a.m., but that it looked like broad daylight outside through the curtain. Only she agreed that something strange took place that night. In August of 2016, I experienced something very odd while solo backpacking in the Headwaters Wilderness region of northern Wisconsin. I have no sweet clue what I experienced, and I'm not about to jump to conclusions either, but whatever it was really screwed me up for a long time, and I haven't been quite the same since. So before all this, I had some experience hiking, but never solo hiking. I did a 7-day hike in the Sawtooth Mountains on the Superior Hiking Trail in Minnesota with a couple friends. I spent a week in the Black Hills in South Dakota and another week in the Bighorn Mountains, Wyoming. I was doing day hikes there. So I'm hiking this 18-mile segment. I plan to take the trail in 3 nights at a very leisurely pace. I told my family members and my workplace my route, where I was beginning, where I was ending, and all that stuff. I had a friend drop me off at the beginning of the trail. The first day was extremely uneventful, but very pleasant. Sundown was about an hour away. I set up camp for the evening. I didn't start a campfire. All the dead wood around me was too damp to work with. I was munching on some dinner and looking at the map. I was already ahead of schedule. I did 8 miles instead of the planned 6. I decided to take the next day more slowly. After thinking about this, I get inside my tent. I crawl into my sleeping bag and I wrap up in my army blanket. I left the rain fly off so I could look at the stars when it gets darker. I couldn't sleep though. I never sleep very well on my first night out. Plus, it's still in twilight at the moment. Suddenly, I hear something. Foliage, thrashing, and branches being snapped. This kind of spooks me, but I realize it could just be an animal. I sit upright, anxious to see what it might be. A doe and 2 fawn blast into the clearing that I'm in. They pause for a second mid-stride and then dart around my tent and continue off into the woods. I notice now that it's absolutely silent, save for the wind. I feel really uncomfortable. I grab my dad's old army knife and some bear spray out of my bag in case something else happens. I guess I must have dozed off because I woke up suddenly. It's extremely dark. There's some clouds that must have rolled in. The normal forest sounds had returned. I hear random animals and such. There's a stiff wind blowing in from the east. Something feels odd though, like there's this electricity in the air, like a feeling before a storm. I prop myself up on my elbows and look around. I have pretty good night vision. I prefer not to use flashlights when possible, so I still have use of my peripherals. I just see trees and a faint outline of the sky. I get this recurring pang in my chest, like something bad is happening, not quite anxiety. I realize that I can hear something echoing faintly. It's somebody yelling. I haven't run into anybody on the trip yet, but it's not unusual to encounter fishermen or hikers. I can only hear one voice. It sounds like they're yelling at something. It sounds fearful or defensive. I'm not really sure what to do. The yelling goes on for a couple of minutes and then fades away. I was on high alert, very spooked, but I guess it's probably just a black bear getting into their food or something. I just kind of think to myself about maybe putting the bear bags up in a higher tree or something. I spend the rest of the night kind of on edge. I don't really sleep until the sun rises. I wake up to an overcast sky with the same stiff wind. I still want to enjoy my hiking trip and greatly enjoy overcast and damp days. There's only 4 miles to hike today. I just kind of take my time with it. I decide to spend plenty of time relaxing or just screwing around like a kid and skipping rocks. The sound from the night before of the guy yelling is still kind of ringing in the back of my mind, so I clip the army knife to my belt. So after I close up camp and I head down the trail, I reckon that the direction that I'm headed in is where I heard the yelling from. The trail goes around a lake and then follows a little creek upstream for a while. I catch some crayfish out of the mouth of the creek for the hell of it. I let them pinch me and I toss them back in. I manage to catch a minnow with my bare hands. I try to give it to a crayfish, but it doesn't seem interested. I collect some keepsakes for the trip and kindling for a fire tonight if it gets a little chilly. After doing this for a while and thinking I have enough, I get bored and I continue on. I've been walking for a while when I start to feel the same pang in my chest from the night before. I go a little slower, trying to be more aware of my surroundings. Nothing seems unusual, but I still feel on edge. Eventually, I reach some pretty thick trees and foliage. It blocks out more sunlight. After about an hour of walking through the trees and feeling increasingly nervous, shit gets weird. I notice that the path onwards looks wrong. I should mention at this point that I don't have the best vision. I can't read street signs farther than 50 feet away, for example. The air ahead looks like it's shimmering. I think it's just my eyes screwing with me, but as I continue, I realize it's like a wall of mirage. The path about 300 feet away appears to be breathing, like light through water or a road on a hot day. This doesn't feel right in my gut at all. I don't just want to turn around like a pussy, but I don't want to continue. Despite all of this, I get a compelling thought to investigate. I put down my bag and kind of awkwardly move forward. I think I'm noticing glimmering lights like the setting sun off a lake or something, but they're very sparse, but definitely not something that I'm imagining. I look back to where I came from at my bag. The path looks completely normal. I look forward again. The path looks all kinds of weird and screwed up. Everything in my body is telling me to turn away and get the hell out of there. I was driven onward by this compelling idea to keep going, kind of like the feeling to look at somebody walking by or something. About 50 feet away from the mirage is when it gets absolutely chilling cold. I'm talking about seeing my breath, shivering. I hear this quiet but high-pitched whistle, like a metal grinding sound, or train brakes distantly, although it's a very consistent tone. This isn't right. Why did I do this? I turn back to where I come from, but the trail is gone. I'm standing in the middle of the woods, up to my chest in ferns and bushes, surrounded by a light fog. I can't see more than 500 feet into the woods. This is completely screwed up, completely effed. I get frozen to the spot by fear, but adrenaline is kicking into high gear. My body is screaming at me to do something, to flee. The whistling sound gets louder. I feel like it's now behind me. I try moving, but it feels like I'm underwater or in a dream. I feel a terrifying presence immediately behind me, no matter which direction I turn. I yell out in pure terror. This seems to break whatever was stopping me from running. I just take off like a bat out of hell. I'm tripping over logs, branches, and rocks, but I just tumble head over heels and keep bowling on in whatever direction I was headed. I realize I'm headed downhill. I can see the stream. I jump clean over it, but I completely eat shit on my landing and crash. I just get up and keep going. I don't remember what happened. I just remember running and running and running. I guess I blacked out eventually. I don't remember any sort of transition away from the fog or the darkness under the trees, but when I woke up, it was cloudless. My hiking boots were gone, and I was in a small field a good distance away from the forest. I don't know how far I ran or where I ended up, but I got myself rather well lost. When I woke up, my body ached like nothing else. My body was covered in scores of bruises, cuts, and scrapes. I was confused and disoriented, and I took quite some time to gather myself. Based on the position of the sun, I started going southeast. I guessed that I cleared the stream going north and was following it east toward a road. I eventually found the stream, and actually found the spot where I ate shit crashing on the bank. There was scattered dirt and leaves everywhere. I got this sickening feeling, knowing that I was going back to where whatever happened. There were still no sign of my boots, but I'm used to going barefoot. I didn't bother going back for any of my supplies. I jogged along the stream for a couple of hours, and I found my way to the road that evening. I didn't know what day it was, but it was a good 3 hours to sunset, and I only had the clothes on my back for the night, and my army knife that somehow stayed miraculously clipped to my belt. I stood in the middle of the road all night, paranoid and shaking. I wasn't sure if I should wait or try to start walking the dozen or so miles to the nearest intersection where I may have a higher chance of encountering somebody. All night, I thought I heard voices or footsteps, but for sure, I kept hearing rocks, either clattering together or being thrown in the woods. I didn't like it one bit. I'll never forget those cold hours spent spinning in place with the knife in my hand, wondering what was out there. The next morning, some younger woman drove by and didn't stop. I don't blame her. I wouldn't stop for some shoeless, dirty person holding a knife either. But about a half hour later, a cop came rolling down the road and squealed his siren at me a couple times. He asked me to put down the knife and we could talk. I did so. I told him I was lost. I didn't give any details. He looked really suspiciously at me the whole time, with his hand on his gun. It turned out to be Monday morning. I was supposed to be picked up Sunday morning, about 10 miles up the road. I got driven to a police station and cleaned up a little. I didn't give them my full story for fear of being considered a druggie, but it felt like that they already thought that about me anyways. They didn't believe that I'd wandered off the path for a piss and didn't find my way back. They didn't want to go looking for my bag either, and neither did I. My shithead friend hadn't even called me in missing, which really pissed me off. He told me he drove up and down the road for a couple hours, and then after I didn't show up, he just left and said that he'd call it in the morning, figuring that I was just taking my time, or finished early and found a ride. Having not told anyone, he figured that if I didn't turn up the next day, he would start getting worried then. I don't know what the hell happened to me, but I also don't want to go back out there and find out. So what do you think happened in these two encounters? I know I use the word strange a lot on this channel, but these two are definitions, in my opinion, of high strangeness. One sounds like some kind of abduction attempt. One sounds like something straight out of a Missing 411 book. So, again, let me know what you thought happened down in the comments. As always, if you have an encounter of your own, I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. Also down there are links to a PayPal, a Patreon, and super thanks and memberships and all that stuff here on YouTube. But also, just watching the video, just being here with me, and doing all this cool stuff really helps the channel as well. So with all of that, I hope you have a good week, and I hope you'll join me on Friday. I'll see you then. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.